Interesting matchup in Bloomington between Minnesota and Indiana, two teams that are both above 500 in Big Ten play. That will change on Friday night. That is Carter Elliott, Sleepers Media. I'm Brian Ralph of HXVB here, breaking down Indiana, Minnesota, playing at Assembly Hall. Carter, this is a game that I think has more intrigue than it looks at on the surface. Minnesota's riding a 7-game win streak into this, but they haven't really beaten anybody of substance. The three Big Ten wins they have were home against Nebraska, at Michigan, might be the worst team in the Big Ten, home against Maryland. No non-conference wins to speak of. This is a chance for Minnesota to make a sort of statement. And I know Indiana has struggled at times, but anytime you can go win at Assembly Hall, that's a big deal.
Yeah, 100%. And it's also a spot for Maryland where I think you're going to be able to find out, is this team going to like completely snowball, or are they going to be able to kind of bounce back? Like, to me, Indiana is not necessarily a good Big Ten team, but the fact that they have Assembly Hall and they have that home court advantage, they on paper should be able to get these games. They should be. But also, I have found myself, and if somebody watches this video who can find out what I said about Minnesota in the preseason, this is like not your, I don't know what the phrase, this is not your mother's Minnesota. Like, they like got some guys on this team. Like, Dawson Garcia is
Yeah.
all Big Ten level talent. Ben Johnson did a great job getting the additions of guys like Hawkins. They had the younger Christie coming off the bench. Like, they got some guys on this team, and Pharrell Payne is a monster. I hope that Minnesota can do whatever they can to keep him, because if he hits the transfer portal after this season, I'm sorry to do that and play that game, I think he could get all types of suitors for him because he's a monster. So this is an interesting game. Pharrell Payne, a really good front court player, going up against maybe one of the better front courts with kel'el Ware and Malik Renew. I do that every time in the Big Ten. So it's going to be an interesting game. Indiana's in a major bounce back spot. That was an ugly, ugly game at Rutgers. I
Yeah.
don't know if there's any other adjectives I can use to describe how ugly that was besides using their free throw shooting as an example, but it was a really, really rough game to watch.
Yeah, and Assembly Hall has been their safe haven. They did not have that at Rutgers. They were able to outlast Ohio State in their last home game. Beat Maryland there, pushed Kansas to the brink. Best performance that Indiana has had all season. Xavier Johnson is back, which should give them a boost. Didn't necessarily against Rutgers, but should give them a boost. But they've lost 2 of their last 3. How are you feeling about Indiana coming into this?
I'm worried. I'm really worried about them. I think that Coach Woodson put all his eggs in the Xavier Johnson and Trey Galloway backcourt basket, and that has not reaped any rewards for him.
No.
Not only has it not reaped rewards, I think it's affected them negatively. I mean, uh, in the last game, Trey Galloway, I believe, was 4 for 13 from the field. 2 for 6 from the line. They shot 4 of 15, I believe, as a team from the free throw line, which is something I've never seen. I've never seen that many air
Yeah,
balls as
4 of
well.
15.
Yeah, that's just a putrid play. Xavier Johnson had more turnovers than points, field goals, assists in this game. He also punched an opposing player in the family jewels. Like, it was just a train wreck of a backcourt game. And look, some of the famous last words of a team are like, there's no way this team can shoot that poorly as they did against so-and-so team. Indiana's a team that can certainly repeat a tough shooting night on any given night. So maybe they get to the friendly confines of Assembly Hall and they bounce back. But if they have this same shooting performance again, it's not like I could text you offline, Ralph, and be like, hey, Indiana just shot this again. You'd be like, oh, no way they did that. Not Indiana. Like, this is who this team is.
Yeah, you mentioned the Johnson Galloway backcourt. Like, that's the gamble they took on this, is there's no shooting and there's no depth to come in and add shooting when your starters are struggling. It's a weakness with this group. I think you could argue that they have shot better than we thought they would, and maybe there's some regression to the mean that needs to happen. Not like they're a great shooting team, but if I were to tell you they were top 80 in effective field goal percentage, that seems high.
Yeah.
Just for what we have on paper for the Hoosiers, that seems high. So we'll look at them in a second, but I want to go back to Minnesota because I got the sense that you feel like Minnesota is legit. They're 12-3. Some questions about their resume, but you think they're legit. What about the Gophers makes you think that?
I actually like it. It might be an easy cop out, but I kind of lean into like what Ben Johnson is like preaching with this Minnesota team.
Okay.
Like, I think in the offseason, he kept Pharrell Payne, got Dawson Garcia back. That's two front court talents right there. Lock that down. Got Christie, pretty, solid top 100 kid. Did a good job of getting him. That's two. And then goes out and adds pieces like Hawkins, and then he has Carrington as well. I just think that this this team has guys, and I see them playing as a connected basketball team and playing how Ben Johnson wants them to play. And look, I think they have talent. They are still far, far, far from one of the like more talented teams in the Big Ten. But I go back to when they played Michigan, and granted, Michigan's not a good basketball team at all. But there was like an under 8 timeout, and I'm looking at the Michigan huddle, and I'm looking at Juwan Howard, and it just looks like a dumpster fire. Everyone's everywhere, no one's doing everything. I look over to Minnesota's bench, and Ben Johnson is locked in with this team. They are all looking at him, eyes locked in, like, ready to go out there and execute what he's trying to say. And this could be like a game. It could go both ways. It could be like Indiana's going to snowball, or okay, maybe we should start paying a little bit more attention to Minnesota. They're not a bottom dweller in the Big Ten. They're not going to finish top 4 or anything like that. But people like myself need to give Minnesota a bit more respect. So maybe I could really see them coming out with that intensity. Like, let's go out
Mm-hmm.
there and show them that it's not fluke. Like, we can go on the road and we can beat, quote unquote, good. Indiana, the name still carries weight itself. We
Right.
can go on the road as Minnesota and win a game in Assembly Hall. Like, that means something.
Yeah, it's a big stage too, right? This isn't a game that's going to get buried at 4 o'clock on a Saturday. This is Assembly Hall on a Friday night. Like that matters. Indiana is not going to be the best team that Minnesota has played, but the stage will be the biggest. And so it gives you the opportunity to make that kind of statement. And I'm glad you brought up the cohesion of this group. It kind of reminds me of South Carolina. I think there's a lot of similarities between Minnesota and South Carolina this season. My alma mater. Teams that were picked to finish last in their leagues pretty convincingly. Both have had really good starts to the season despite a talent deficit because of that togetherness and cohesion. Minnesota's second nationally in assist rate. They're shooting well from 3. They have, as you mentioned, some talented pieces, and they're playing through them, and they're knowing how to play through them. And there is not a me kind of situation here. There's no ISO ball. It is cohesion, ball movement, playing together and playing off each other. There's a trust that's involved in that. And that bodes well. I have not seen that same kind of trust and cohesion with Indiana at any point this season. Indiana is better, but I have not seen that at any point this season. And I think that could be a factor here.
Yeah, and I think Indiana needs to go back to what was working during that win streak. And me and GregWaddell of Sleepers Media, we've been talking about this a lot offline, that kel'el Ware might be the most talented player on Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
But it's best when you just kind of let kel'el Ware be talented. Just let him be talented.
Right.
He'll be 7 foot. He'll be athletic. He will do what he does, but don't necessarily make him the focal point. Malik Reneau has been filling up the stat sheet. I'm not talking about just like points. He's been getting rebounds. He's been making the right passes, making the right plays. And he was on a monster streak of some really good games. And I think that they kind of got to go all in on him, and just let him just create, because they're not getting creation out of their point guard or guard play right now. Malik Reneau is the best passer on this basketball team currently right now. So I think they need to play through him more. Especially at home. He plays really, really well at home, as well as do most college basketball players, but he definitely does too. And I think they need to lean into that, because Minnesota definitely isn't as talented as a front court, but a front court of Dawson Garcia and Pharrell Payne can hang with any front court. I think they are good enough to hang.
So who wins? Who wins this game? Give me a prediction.
After all that I just said, I just don't think Minnesota has enough to go on the road at Assembly Hall and win a game. That's a feat, even for how good or bad Indiana has been. I mean, we saw Kansas go in there and pull one out, but they struggled. It's just really tough to go in there and win a basketball game. And I just don't see it. I think it'll be a close game, but I think Indiana eventually will pull it out in the end.
I think so too. I think this will be a game we leave where we feel like Indiana lost, but they won by like 4.
Right. Like we leave with a whole new respect for Minnesota, and we're just like, Indiana.
Right. It's just like Assembly Hall happened, and they ended up with a win. I think that's what we'll see. But I expect Minnesota to put up a good showing here
Yeah,
on that
100%.
stage. I
It's
expect
a
it to be a good
sneaky
game.
good game, like you said.
Yeah, I expect it to be a good one for sure. And we'll be back afterwards to break it down and all the other big games from around the country that happened this weekend on Sleepers Media YouTube channel.